The studio buzzed with anticipation, a cauldron of light and sound. December 2025. The air was thick with the hum of cameras, their lenses glinting like the eyes of predators. The audience, a sea of faces under the harsh glow of spotlights, whispered feverishly, their murmurs rising and falling like waves. On the X platform, hashtags like fictional Crockett vs. Niro and Truth on Air were already trending, with clips of the pre-show circulating, amassing millions of views. The nation was watching, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sat ramrod straight, her fingers clutching a folder of documents. Her dark eyes burned with purpose, though a flicker of doubt lingered beneath. Known for her fiery speeches and unyielding fight for justice, she was a force in Congress, but tonight was different. Her colleagues had warned her, "Jasmine, you're taking on a titan." De Niro's not just an actor, he's a cultural institution. But she didn't care. This was personal. Growing up in Dallas, she'd seen how celebrity voices drowned out the struggles of ordinary people, twisting narratives to serve power. Tonight, she aimed to hold one such voice accountable. Across from her sat Robert De Niro, his silver hair catching the light, his sharp gaze softened by a faint, knowing smile. At 82, he carried the weight of a legend. Decades of iconic roles, from Taxi Driver to The Irishman. But his outspoken political activism had made him a lightning rod. His speeches, often laced with biting humor and righteous anger, polarized audiences. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to spar, and his pride, his Achilles heel, wouldn't let him back down. The host, Elliot Marshall, stood between them, his polished grin masking the glee of a man orchestrating a spectacle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice cutting through the crowd's buzz, "tonight we have a clash for the ages. Congresswoman Crockett claims Robert De Niro is using his fame to manipulate America. Jasmine, tell us, what's your case?" The audience erupted, cheers mingling with jeers. Cameras zoomed in, capturing Crockett's steadying breath, her fingers tightening on the folder. She had come to dismantle his influence. But the next hour would rewrite the script. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp, cutting through the studio's hum like a blade. "Mr. De Niro," she began, her Texas drawl laced with steel, "you've built a career on telling stories. But the stories you're telling now, on stages, in interviews, on X, are dangerous. You're not just an actor anymore. You're a megaphone for divisive causes, using your fame to sway millions without accountability." The audience gasped, then fell silent. De Niro's smile didn't waver, but his eyes narrowed, a spark of defiance igniting. On X, posts exploded. "She's calling out Bobby D. Crockett versus De Niro, and De Niro's about to get roasted." The host, Elliot, raised an eyebrow, sensing blood in the water. "Strong words, Congresswoman. Care to back them up?" Crockett opened her folder, pulling out a stack of papers. "In 2024, you endorsed a campaign that pushed for defunding community programs in urban areas, programs that keep kids off the streets. You called it reform, but the data shows crime spiked in those neighborhoods. You didn't live in those communities, Mr. De Niro." "I did. I've seen what happens when rhetoric outpaces reality." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of her past. She'd grown up watching families like hers struggle, their voices drowned by those with bigger platforms. De Niro leaned back, his fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. The cameras caught the motion, amplifying it on the massive studio screens. "Congresswoman," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "I've spent my life telling stories about the underdog. You think I don't care about those kids? I backed that campaign because it promised to redirect funds to better schools, not to hurt communities. You're cherry-picking facts to fit your narrative." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shaking their heads. X lit up with reactions. "De Niro's dodging? Truth on Air and Crockett's got receipts." Crockett's jaw tightened. She hadn't expected him to pivot so smoothly. Her heart raced. She couldn't afford to lose this fight, not with her constituents watching, not with her colleagues waiting for her to falter. De Niro wasn't done. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Crockett's. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about Congress. You pass laws, but how many of them actually help the people you claim to represent? I use my platform to shine a light on what's broken. You call it manipulation. I call it speaking truth to power. The audience roared, some clapping, others booing. Elliot Marshall, ever the showman, fanned the flames. Whoa, Bob, you're turning the tables. Jasmine, what's your response? Crockett felt the weight of the moment, the cameras boring into her. She'd prepared for this, but De Niro's charisma was a force of nature, disarming and relentless. She flipped through her folder, pulling out a transcript of one of his speeches. Here's what you said in October. We need to tear down the system and start over. That's not truth, Mr. De Niro. That's a call to chaos, and it's dangerous when it comes from someone with your reach. De Niro chuckled, a sound that filled the studio with unexpected warmth. You're quoting me out of context, Congresswoman. That speech was about reforming a system that's been failing people for decades, people like the ones you claim to fight for. I grew up in Little Italy, not some ivory tower. I've seen struggle. Have you read the whole speech, or just the soundbite? The crowd erupted again and X was ablaze. De Niro just schooled her. Crockett versus De Niro. Crockett's face burned. She'd underestimated him, assuming his fame would make him an easy target. But he was no ordinary opponent. He was a master of narrative, turning her accusations into a performance. As the tension peaked, a new voice cut through the noise. A woman in the audience stood, holding up her phone. I'm Lena Carter, a journalist with the Daily Pulse, she said, her voice trembling but clear. I have something to add. The cameras swiveled, catching her in the spotlight. Elliot, sensing a twist, motioned for her to continue. Mr. De Niro, Lena said, you funded a community center in Harlem last year, quietly, no press. I wrote about it, but it didn't go viral because it wasn't controversial. That center saved my nephew's life. He was headed down a bad path until they gave him a place to go. She turned to Crockett. Congresswoman, I respect your fight, but you're wrong about him. He's not just talk. The studio fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Crockett's folder slipped slightly in her hands. De Niro's expression softened, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face. On X, the narrative shifted. Wait, De Niro's funding community centers, Truth on Air, and Crockett's got egg on her face now. Crockett took a breath, her mind racing. She could double down, but the audience was slipping away. She'd come to destroy De Niro's influence, but now she saw the cost of her approach. She wasn't just fighting him, she was fighting a story, one he'd spent decades crafting. Crockett stood, her voice softer now, but no less resolute. Mr. De Niro, I'll give you credit. You've done good things, but good deeds don't erase the harm of reckless words. When you speak, millions listen, and not all of them hear the nuance. You have a responsibility to be clear, to be careful. De Niro nodded, his smile gone, replaced by a look of respect. And you, Congresswoman, have a responsibility to listen, not just to the sound bites, but to the whole story. I'm not your enemy. We both want what's right, even if we see it differently. The studio was silent, the air heavy with the weight of their exchange. Then, slowly, De Niro extended his hand. Crockett hesitated, her pride warring with her principles. Finally, she took it, their handshake a quiet acknowledgement of mutual respect. The audience erupted in applause, not for a victor, but for the moment itself. Crockett didn't destroy De Niro's career, as she'd intended. But as she left the stage, her head held high, she felt a shift. She'd lost the battle, but she'd gained something else: clarity. De Niro's influence wasn't the problem. The problem was how society consumed it, amplifying fragments without context. On X, the conversation exploded, not with vitriol, but with questions. Who's really accountable for what celebrities say? Crockett versus De Niro, and maybe dialogue is the answer, not destruction. De Niro, too, left changed. He'd defended himself, but Crockett's challenge forced him to reflect on the weight of his words. In a quiet moment backstage, he told an aide, "She's got fire. We need more like her." The clash didn't end with a knockout, but it sparked a broader dialogue. Across America, people began to question the role of celebrity in politics, the ethics of public shaming, and the power of listening. X became a battleground of ideas, not insults, as users debated with facts and stories of their own. Crockett and De Niro, unlikely allies in a polarized world, had shown that strength lies not in destroying an opponent, but in meeting them where they stand. The moral was clear. Words are weapons, but dialogue is a bridge. Respect for differing views isn't weakness. It's the foundation of progress. Call to action. What do you think? Did Crockett go too far, or was she right to challenge De Niro? Share your thoughts in the comments, like and subscribe for more stories that spark real conversation.